there are many mythological, very unusual creatures all over the Haggadah, and some of the art historians are trying to find connection between what you can find three-dimensionally, plastically represented on cathedrals all over Europe. Because if you go to Notre Dame, or if you go whatever, on all these cathedrals, on the sides, gargoyle, right? So you have all these kinds of dragons, and yes, so Haggadah is full of them. Yes. And interestingly enough, what do you think the Maror?
It came to Christian art through the Celtic art from Northern Europe. These kind of dragons came through into book illustrations from the Irish book illustrators and so on. Wow! So this also already blended. Also the Christian style is already blended from different directions. That's the basis for the Jewish artists or artists for the Jews.
Now, and the red thing that Eliezer distributed, we chose one dragon as a symbol.
Yeah. Yes, and then his society is called the Dragons of the Haggadah. Yes?
Haggadah, the record of Haggadah is actually our
society.
Okay. So, let me just show another thing. When you say Maror, what's your picture? Chasa. Okay, green salad. Well, interestingly enough, in 14th century Spain, it was artichoke. Artichoke. זה מרור. מרור זה, כתוב. זה גמר, artichoke. Okay, so... See? Okay, so you also have a picture of typical synagogue, right? Yeah, so we can see that even in Spain, the Sephardim had the same Sifrei Torah like the Ashkenazim and not like the Orientals. In other words, they are not in the wood made or silver made. They are not in bookcases. You can see that they have bad. Meilei Torah. They have made. It's not in the stories.
No, because the whole idea of Saragossa's story is that they had wooden case.
Okay, but in the picture you can see.
In the picture is bad.
Yeah. Okay. So if anybody wants to see the Haggadah, please do. Now this particular Haggadah is kept in the safe below here. They have 3 people. Each of them has something different. They need to bring 3 of them together in order to put the Haggadah on the display. Because one person, מישהו מקליט. מישהו מקליט.
חשבתי שזה שייך לקונסטרוקציה.
Okay, so one person has the key, the other person has the key of the room, and the third person has the number of the alarm, right? So you need to get those 3 in order to have the Haggadah taken from the safe and put here on the display. Usually...
And one is Muslim and one is Christian.
Well, this is Bosnia. One of them could be all of that at the same time. You have a Christian mother and Muslim father and Jewish grandmother, right? That's not a problem. So, okay. Now, during the medieval times, there were 3, before Bosnia got, how do you call it? Conquered by the Turks. There were 3 types of Christians in Bosnia, right? There was, Herzegovina was basically mostly Orthodox, right? And it was called Hum at the moment. And Bosnia was mostly Bosnian Christians and some Catholics. Now when you say Bosnian Christians, you ask yourself, what does that mean? Well, this is something that happened all over different places. These were people who rejected the Latin Missa, and they went with overwhelming majority of their priests. They opted for the Missa in local, popular, vernacular language. But basically they were offspring of the Catholic Church. They were Catholics who said to the Pope, bye-bye, see you, nobody needs you. Then there was a part of the church which stayed loyal to the Pope. Their bishop was not sitting in Bosnia. He was basically kicked out from Bosnia to Đakovo in the neighboring Croatia. So basically, upper part of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is called Bosnia, was divided between ex-Catholics, who are now called Bosnian Christians, and Catholics, while the lower part was overwhelmingly Orthodox. However, though, in every single, everybody knows that in order to build a nation, you need a story. Now, stories, history is not coherent. Story should be. So, you have here in this country, and I suppose you would like to hear about that, and it's 2 or 3 minutes, I'm not going to elaborate too much. But you have, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, you have 2 competing betrayal accusations, 2 main narratives fighting each other. So on one side you have Serbs, on another side you have Bosniaks or Muslims, / Muslims. Now Serbs would say, all the Bosniaks are Serbs who converted to Islam. Right? Very easy. Now the Bosniaks would say, well, this is Bosnia, this is not Serbia. So even Serbs here are either strangers who came from Serbia or Bosnians who were Serbicized. Okay. Now, what's the truth behind it? Oh, okay, so the Bosniak Muslim narrative is based on interpretation which doesn't have anything to do with history, which says Bosnian Christians, they were Bogumils. Bogumils, they were a special Christian heretics, which didn't believe in Trinity, which didn't believe in divinity of Jesus, which didn't believe in cross and icons.
They were Jews.
They were Jews. So, they were equally persecuted by the Catholics and by the Orthodox. So when the Islam came, this was for them liberation. Because being Muslim was being better Christian for them than being Catholic or Orthodox. Because Muslims did not believe in Trinity, Jesus' divinity, The only problem is they were never Bogumils in Bosnia, ever. Bogumils tried to make it from Bulgaria to Serbia, Serbian king killed them all. So they never made it through Serbia to Bosnia. Okay. So are really Bosnian Muslims Serbs who converted? Of course not. Are Bosnian Serbs Bosnians who got Serbicized? No. The reality is much more complex than national narratives, and it is impossible to project modern concepts of nation to the Middle Ages, right? Anyhow, in Middle Ages, people they had regional identity, they had religious identity, but they were not very high on national identities, okay? So, in any case, the truth of the matter is, the genetical research shows that there is zero difference between Bosnian Serbs and Bosnian Muslims. And there is the same amount of difference, basically zero, between anybody in Bosnia and anybody in Serbia and anybody in Montenegro, right? So interestingly enough, we can conclude saying that it is all old Balkan population, which was forcefully Slavicized when the Slavs came. Now the Slavs didn't came here in millions, and modern genetic research shows that Slavic component in Yugoslavian genetics is very low. That basically means that there were local people, Celts, Illyrians, Thracians, Dacians, and so on, and then Slavs conquered them. And then Slavs got married with their daughters, and Slavs were having their court. So the Slavic language became the prestigious language of the elite. However, though, in villages, many people proceeded speaking Wallachian. And until this very day, especially in Serbia, you have entire villages of people who speak pre-Slavic Eastern Roman dialect. Okay? So, all these people who were only externally Slavicized, they were also only externally made Orthodox, externally made Catholic, and later externally made Muslim. The pagan tradition is alive amongst all of them. All of them celebrate some pagan deities behind Christian or Muslim names of saints, right? And so on. So it's one and the same people, which has three different identities. Everybody who became Catholic with the time developed Croatian identity, even though Croatia is another country, right? And then everybody who became Orthodox developed Serbian mentality. And then everybody who became Muslim developed Bosniak mentality. So consequently, the same way the Orthodox Christian population in Bosnia and Herzegovina is Serb, if you think that there is no equanimity in this, the Muslims in Montenegro, who know they are Montenegrins who converted to Islam 150, 200 years ago, today they are Bosniaks. Because they are Muslims. Secondly, they are Bosniaks. They never had anything to do with this piece of land, right? They were born there. Their forefathers were born there. Their forefathers were born there. They were always Montenegrins. Once upon a time they were Orthodox. They are Muslim. If they are Muslim, they are Bosniaks. Now we have in Kosovo, for example, Slavic-speaking Muslim population in Kosovo today says we are Bosniaks. Why? We are Muslims, so we must be Bosniaks. So now, what's the problem? The problem is that in the Balkans, just like in the rest of the Ottoman Empire, there is no difference between ethnicity and religion, religion and ethnicity. To conclude the entire story, I will just give you two anecdotes. One anecdote is a professor of Ladino at the Sorbonne University, Marie-Christine Barol, a nice French Catholic lady. She got married to a guy from Istanbul, Jewish guy from Istanbul, and Sabitai, and she was speaking from the 0 day with her husband and with her mother-in-law. She was speaking with them Judo-Spanish. She was speaking with them Ladino. And then we were in some congress and she tells me, listen, I understood almost every single word from the beginning. Together, they didn't make any sense. So I was like, what do you mean? And she says, we are having a Sunday lunch, and then all of a sudden, my mother-in-law says, well, what do you want? Armenians are also Greek. So I say, how can Armenians be Greek? And she says, well, they are not Turks like Albanians. Okay, now in Ladino, Greek means Eastern Christian, and Turk means Sunni Muslim, right? So you use those words as synonyms. Now, right now I'm teaching literature, but when I only came to the Gurion University, I was teaching the language, and the kids, the students, didn't really believe me when I told them, you know, Balkans and Jews spoke Spanish, right? So Jews, Spanish, Balkans, doesn't have anything to do. I decided that every time I'm opening a new course, I will bring one of the old-timers, so that at least the students will see that I'm not inventing this. There is at least one another person who says, I was there, I saw it, it's true. And then always one and the same thing would happen. I would call somebody of the old-timers, and they would say, oh, Ladino, of course. That's the language of my mother, that's the language of my father, that's the language of my grandmother. I need to come, I have to come, I want to come, when should I come? Okay. Then they come to the class and they say, I don't know why Eliezer invited me, because in my home we didn't speak Ladino. Okay, and then you are totally shocked. Why? Because Ladino, for that generation, is not something to be proud about. French, yes. But Ladino? Okay, and then each single person would say something like this. One time I brought an old guy from Izmir, and he says, I don't know why Eliezer invited me. In my home we didn't speak Ladino. I was born in Izmir, and we were rich. So we lived on the outskirts of the city, and we had Muslim neighbors. And I grew up with my Turkish neighbors. I spoke with them Turkish. I spoke Ladino with their accent. When I came to Alliance Israélite Universelle, I was speaking Ladino like the Turks, and everybody called me a Greek. Now imagine Israeli students. So they all look at them, 50 students. One of them says, and everybody called you a Turk. And he says, no, everybody called me a Greek. So the other guy says, oh, so you spoke with a Greek accent? And the old guy's like, no, I spoke with Turkish accent. Okay, so I enter to help the issue, and I say, what he meant to say is that he spoke like a Goy, right? He spoke like a Gentile. Now, for the Jewish kids who were from the old city, Gentile is Greek, because they lived in the old city of Izmir with Greek population. So he didn't speak like a Jew, he spoke like a Gentile. Gentile is Greek. He spoke like a Greek. I thought I was helping them. But then one kid says, so Izmir is in Greece. And
Greeks would agree.
I know. But then the old guy, he's Jewish, right? So he's neutral. So he says, no, Izmir is in Turkey. Izmirlis are in Greece because Selaniklis are in Istanbul. Right? There was exchange of population. So Izmir is in Greece. But Izmirlis are in Turkey because Selaniklis are in... Okay, so Balkans are a very complicated place because there is no difference between ethnicity and religion and sometimes even language. People usually don't pay attention to it, but Jews called their language Jewish.
Judaism.
In Ladino, you don't say Ladino. In Ladino, you say Judesmo, Gidio, Judio, which means Judaism. That's one of the names for the language. Judesmo means Judaism. And Jews in Salonika called their language Judaism. Do you speak Judaism? Right? And the Jews in Sarajevo called their language Gijo, right? Which means Jewish. Right? So do you speak Jewish? Why? They are Jews, so the language is Jewish. In Turkish constitution and in Turkish legal documents, until very late days of the Republic, Spanish language was called Yahudice, Jewish, because in Turkey it was spoken only by the Jews, right? So the Spanish people, the Spaniards, they spoke Jewish. Consequently, there was this huge disputation over here in Bosnia. What's the name of the language? Now it's very easy. If you are Serbian Orthodox, the name of the language is Serbian. If you are a Catholic Croat, the name of the language is Croat. If you are Bosnian Muslim, the name of the language is Bosnian. So one of the editors of one of the famous weekly newspapers, he goes to his grandma. And he says, you know, cut the bullshit, sorry for my English, let's see what the old people are saying, what's the name of the language. So he goes to his grandma and he says, Ma, how would you call our language? And she says, our language. And he says, but a name. She says, a name? Who needs a name for a language? He needs, but if you were trying to describe to somebody, so she says, I would say, I'm speaking in our language. He says, but if he doesn't know, so she says, how I'm telling him if he doesn't know, because she doesn't know any foreign language. So he says, have anybody ever in your presence used any kind of name for this language? And then the old lady goes thinking, and she says, when I was a kid, when we were disobedient to my grandma, she would scream at us and say, don't you understand me when I speak Turkish to you? So, consequently, the name of the language is Turkish. Now, how come the name of the language is Turkish? Because during the Turkish Empire, the Muslims here were considered Turks. Now, if they are Turks, then their language is obviously Turkish. Now, there is no such a thing in the Balkans as political correctness. So in any of those languages, including one and the same language with four names, everybody calls himself in a very, how do you call it, laudatory way, and he refers to everybody else in a derogatory way, right? So if you, let's say you speak about Jewish experience and Jewish language, so how would Jews call Muslims? You would say, Muslimanos, Musulmanos. They call them almeshas. Now, almesha in Spanish means...
Shells.
No. Pruna. ¿Cómo se dice en inglés? Prune. Okay. Now, why they are called prunes? The Muslims are called prunes in Judeo-Spanish. Why? Because they drink prune brandy, which is forbidden to them according to their religion. The other way they call them is karpasis. Karpasis because karpas. You know karpas? Karpas is green, right? And just like the Muslim flag. And then you put it into wine during the Seder. And the local Muslims are put in the wine all the time, from the point of view of this derogatory term. Then, you can take it further. They used to call Serbs ratones, which means rats. Consequently, The Jews from Orthodox Christian lands were called Achbaroshes, because they are Hebrew lands. Okay, and so on. Then, if you switch to another language, right, every single denomination had derogatory names for all other denominations. And I will end, and I really am ending here. During the communist times, they used to pick every year. Every year they were distributing the 6th of April award. And one of the disciplines was developing brotherhood and unity amongst the peoples of Yugoslavia, right? And then each year they would pick a representative of one religion, and they would give it to him. So one year a Serbian Orthodox priest from Sarajevo got it, and then he was invited to the Central News. And in the Central News he says, oh, it's so obvious, we always lived here together. And then he uses all the derogatory names. He says, we all lived here together, the Serbs, and the Baljas, and the Shokcis, and so on, right? So he uses all imaginable derogatory names, and then there was a short stop in the emission of the program. Now, I don't know how much time we have. We have 15 minutes. Yeah, we have 15 minutes. So, if anybody wants to see whatever pagan, antique, world, Roman,
There is
Greek.
also the ethnographic room.
I know.
That has the Jewish room.
Yeah, it has Jewish room, and it also has the rabbi in the robes and everything. So, if somebody wants ethnology, we can run over there together. If somebody wants to see